A homeless man returned a billionaire woman's lost purse. Her response changed his life forever. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. His shoes had holes in the soles. His coat was thin against the February wind. His name was Daniel Mercer, and he had been sleeping in doorways and under overpasses for 11 months. 11 months of invisible suffering. 11 months of people walking past him like he wasn't there. But on this particular evening, on the wet, gleaming sidewalk outside the Harrington Grand Hotel, Daniel stopped. Because there it was. A purse, black leather, expensive, sitting right there in the middle of the pavement, as if someone had simply forgotten that it existed. Daniel looked left. He looked right. The street was busy, taxis honking, umbrellas bobbing, people rushing by in long coats. But no one seemed to notice the purse. No one seemed to care. He crouched down and picked it up. His hands are shaking, not from the cold, but from something else. Something heavier. Inside that bag was more money than Daniel had seen in over a year. And what he chose to do next would change everything. Who was Daniel Mercer? Really? How does a man end up sleeping on concrete in the middle of winter? And who did that purse belong to? Why would finding a lost bag on a cold city street send shockwaves through 2 lives? And eventually, through an entire community? Sometimes, in the quietest moments, a single decision can crack open the whole world. 3 years earlier, Daniel had been a different man entirely. He'd worked for Kellerman Construction for 9 years, laying foundations, pouring concrete, building the kind of structures that outlast the people who build them. He was good at his job. He was the kind of man who showed up early and stayed late. His crew liked him. His boss trusted him. He had a small apartment on the east side of the city. It wasn't fancy. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled like coffee in the mornings, a window that looked out onto a fire escape and a slice of sky. But it was his. And then there was Marie. Marie was his wife of 6 years. She had a laugh that could fill a room and a stubborn streak that Daniel always said he loved, even on the days it drove him half mad. She had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer when she was 34. 14 months later, she was gone. Daniel didn't spiral immediately. He kept going to work. He kept paying his bills. He kept putting one foot in front of the other because that was the only thing he knew how to do. But grief has a way of accumulating. It doesn't always announce itself. It seeps in slowly, through sleepless nights, missed shifts. A bottle kept a little too close on the nights when the apartment was so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. And then Kellerman Construction shut down. Not slowly, overnight. The owner had made bad decisions, backed the wrong projects, and one morning, the gates were locked and the phones were disconnected. Daniel and 43 other workers showed up and found a notice taped to the chain-link fence. He applied for other jobs. He sent letters. He made calls. But the economy was tight, his references were scattered, and every month that passed made the gap on his resume look a little wider. 6 months after losing his job, Daniel lost his apartment. He moved into a shelter. Then the shelter had a bed bug outbreak and closed for fumigation. Then the next one had a waiting list. Then winter came, and that is how a man who spent his life building things found himself with nothing solid left to stand on. But here is what the city did not know about Daniel Mercer. Even on the worst nights, he shared. If someone gave him a sandwich and he'd already eaten, he passed it along. If a younger man arrived at his usual doorway, not knowing the area, Daniel would point him to the safest spots, the churches that handed out meals on Thursdays, the clinic that saw you without ID. He never asked for anything in return. He had lost everything material, but he hadn't lost himself. Not yet. Eleanor Whitmore was, by most measures, one of the most powerful women in the city. She had built her real estate empire from nothing. Her words, not a publicist's. At 22, she had taken a small inheritance left by her grandmother and invested it in a rundown commercial building in a neighborhood everyone else had given up on. She'd fixed it up herself, rented it out, reinvested the profits, and repeated the process until her name was on 12 buildings, 3 luxury hotel properties, and a portfolio that made financial journalists write breathless articles about her. She was 61 now. Her hair was silver and precisely cut. She wore no jewelry except a single thin watch. She did not attend galas or give interviews. She had been described as formidably private in one profile and a ghost in plain sight in another. Some people who had worked with Eleanor called her fair. Others called her cold. A few called her brilliant. Almost everyone agreed on one thing. She trusted very few people, and she had earned that wariness. What almost no one knew was why. Because Eleanor Whitmore had once trusted someone completely. A business partner, early in her career. A man she had believed in so thoroughly that she had given him access to everything. Her accounts, her plans, her future. And he had taken it all, nearly bankrupting her, and walked away without a backward glance. She had rebuilt. She had recovered. But something had calcified inside her after that. A quiet, ancient grief that she kept perfectly sealed behind the exterior of a woman who had everything under control. The night of the purse, Eleanor had been attending a private dinner at the Harrington Grand. A small gathering. 4 people, 12 courses, a conversation about a property acquisition on the city's west side. She had stepped outside briefly to take a phone call. The pavement was wet from an earlier rain. Her car was idling at the curb. And in the brief distraction of the call, her lawyer speaking quickly about a clause she needed to reconsider, her purse had slipped from under her arm. She didn't notice until she was already in the car, pulling away from the hotel. "Stop," she said quietly. Her driver pulled over. Eleanor searched the back seat, then her coat pockets, then understood with a cold certainty what had happened. Her assistant had already started calling the hotel. But Eleanor sat very still, looking out the rain-streaked window, thinking. The purse contained $4,200 in cash. It contained 3 credit cards. It contained her identification. And it contained something else, a small, folded note, written in her own handwriting, that she had been carrying for 20 years. The note was a message from her mother, written in the last weeks of her mother's life. 4 lines. No one else had ever read them. The money could be replaced. The cards could be canceled. Even the ID was replaceable. But that note. Eleanor closed her eyes. Meanwhile, on the wet pavement of the same street, Daniel Mercer was crouched over the purse, opening it slowly, like a man approaching something dangerous. Held in his hands in years. His stomach clenched. His mind went immediately to the practical. A week in a cheap motel. Food. Warmth. Maybe a bus ticket somewhere. Maybe a fresh start somewhere that didn't know his name or his failures. He pulled out the wallet, looked at the ID. Eleanor and Whitmore. He recognized the name. Anyone who had lived in this city for more than a decade recognized the name. The buildings, the hotels, the charity wing of the children's hospital that bore her name on a bronze plaque. One of the richest women in the entire city, Daniel murmured to no one in particular. He sat back on his heels. The rain had started again, light, persistent. His coat was getting wet. He could walk away. No one had seen him pick it up. No cameras that he could spot. In his current life, $4,000 was not a luxury. It was survival. It was oxygen. He opened the purse again. That's when he saw the folded note. He didn't read it. He wasn't that kind of man, but he could see it was old paper, soft at the folds, and written in a careful hand. Something about that note settled it for him. Some things, Daniel thought, aren't yours to keep. Not because you're afraid of consequences, but because you know the difference between what belongs to you and what doesn't. He stood up, tucked the purse under his arm, and started walking toward the hotel. The Harrington Grand had a revolving door that gleamed under golden light. 2 doormen in uniform stood outside. The lobby beyond was warm. Daniel could see the chandeliers, the marble floors, the people moving inside like figures in a painting he was not allowed to touch. He walked up to the entrance. One of the doormen stepped forward immediately. His name tag said Marcus. He was large and professional, and his expression shifted the moment he saw Daniel. The worn coat, the hollow cheeks, the backpack. "Can I help you?" Marcus said, in a tone that meant something else entirely. "I need to return a lost purse," Daniel said. He held it up. "It belongs to Eleanor Whitmore. She was here tonight." Marcus looked at the purse, then back at Daniel. He didn't move. "Where did you get that?" "Off the sidewalk. She dropped it. I'm returning it." "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back. I'm just trying to return." "Step back, sir." Marcus had already touched his earpiece. Security. Daniel took a step back. He kept his hands visible. He had been through enough interactions like this to know that sudden movements were dangerous, that tone of voice mattered, that there was a version of this situation that ended very badly. A second man came out, younger, with the tight jaw of someone who had been trained to see threats everywhere. He looked at Daniel like he was a problem to be solved. "He says he has Ms. Whitmore's purse," Marcus said. "People like you don't walk in here," the second guard said flatly. Daniel looked at him steadily. "I know," he said quietly. "I just came to return something." There was a pause. Something shifted, almost imperceptibly, in Marcus's expression. "Give me the purse," the second guard said, reaching for it. "I'll give it to Ms. Whitmore directly," Daniel said. "Or to her assistant. Or to someone who can confirm it's received. I want to make sure it gets to her. You don't get to make conditions." "I'm not making conditions." Daniel's voice was still calm. "I'm making sure it gets back safely. That's all." Another pause. Then Marcus spoke into his earpiece. A brief, quiet exchange. They made him wait outside for 22 minutes. It was raining harder now. Daniel stood with his backpack and his soaked coat and the purse held against his chest, and he waited. He was very good at waiting. It was one of the few skills homelessness had refined in him. Finally, Marcus came back out. "Ms. Whitmore's assistant is coming down." A woman in her 30s emerged through the revolving door. She looked at Daniel with an expression that was hard to read. Not hostile, but guarded. Her name was Petra. "You have her purse?" Petra said. "Yes." Daniel held it out. Petra took it, looked inside quickly, and then looked back at him. "Everything's here." "Everything," Daniel said. "I didn't take anything." Petra studied him for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. "She wants to meet you." The lobby of the Harrington Grand was everything Daniel had imagined and worse. Worse because it was warm and dry and soft and beautiful in ways that made the contrast with his own life sharp as a blade. He stood near the entrance, dripping slightly, while Petra went to get Eleanor. When Eleanor Whitmore walked across that lobby, Daniel recognized her immediately, not for photographs but from the way she moved. Like someone who had long ago decided that the world would arrange itself around her preferences and had been largely proved right. She stopped a few feet from him and looked at him directly, not with pity, not with the reflexive discomfort that most people showed when confronted with visible poverty. She looked at him the way she might look at a contract, carefully, without sentiment. "You found my purse," she said, "on the sidewalk, outside the entrance. You must have dropped it when you were on the phone." Her expression shifted very slightly. "And you returned it?" "Yes. Everything inside. Everything." She was quiet for a moment. "Then why?" Daniel blinked. It was not the question he had expected. "Because it wasn't mine," he said simply. Eleanor studied him for a long time. Then she said something strange. "Come back tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. Ask for Petra at the front desk." Before Daniel could respond, she had turned and walked away. He stood there for a moment, rain still dripping from his coat onto the marble floor. "She does this sometimes," Petra said, appearing at his shoulder. "When she's curious about someone." Daniel looked at the entrance. Then he looked at the door to the street. Outside was the cold. The doorway he slept in. The long night. 10 o'clock, he said. 10 o'clock. He came back. He didn't sleep that night, not because of the cold, but because his mind was working. He'd been handed small moments of hope before. A job lead, a shelter bed, a stranger's act of generosity. Each one had taught him not to build too much on it. But he came back. Petra took him up in an elevator to a private meeting room on the 4th floor. It was quiet up there. Good furniture. A view of the rain-washed street through tall windows. Eleanor was already seated. No phone. No laptop. Her hands folded on the table. She gestured to the chair across from her. They talked for 2 hours. Eleanor asked him questions, direct, unhurried, without the performance of sympathy. How long had he been on the streets? What work had he done? What had gone wrong? And when? And in what order? Daniel answered honestly. He didn't dress it up. He didn't make himself more pathetic or more heroic. He just told her the truth, the way a man tells the truth when he no longer has anything left to protect. At one point, Eleanor said, "A lot of people found that purse before you." Daniel looked up. "Before me? 3 others in the past year. Different locations. Different amounts of cash." None of them returned it. The silence stretched. "You've been testing people," Daniel said. Eleanor didn't flinch. "I test everything," she said. "Every contract, every tenant, every person who asks me to trust them. I learned that lesson a long time ago." "You left the purse there deliberately," Daniel said. "I wanted to know what kind of people were walking those streets," Eleanor said. "I wanted to know if honesty still existed out there, in the places where no one was watching." "In the note?" Daniel asked quietly. Something moved across Eleanor's face, fast, like a shadow over water. She reached into the purse and removed the folded piece of paper. She looked at it for a long moment. "My mother," she said. "She died when I was 39. I carry this because it reminds me of something I nearly forgot once when I was very focused on winning." She set the note down on the table between them, then looked up. "Money tells you what people want," she said. "But honesty tells you who they really are." Daniel looked at the note. He didn't ask to read it. He wouldn't have. "So now what?" he said. Eleanor sat back. "Now," she said, "I'm going to ask you something I haven't asked anyone in a long time. I'm going to ask you to let me help you." Daniel was quiet. "Not with money," she said quickly, reading his expression. "Money creates dependence. I've seen it destroy people. What I'm offering is different." "What are you offering?" he asked. "A job. Real work, the kind you know how to do. One of my properties needs a maintenance supervisor. The last one retired, and I haven't found anyone I trust enough yet. I'm offering you housing. There's a unit attached to the building, included in the compensation. And I'm offering you a second chance. Earned, not gifted." Daniel sat very still. "Why?" he said finally, and it was the same question she had asked him the night before. Eleanor looked at him steadily. "Because you're the first person in a long time who chose to do the right thing when there was absolutely nothing to gain from it," she said. "That's rare, and I don't waste rare things." Daniel started work on a Monday morning in early March. He arrived 20 minutes early. He had borrowed a clean shirt from a man at the shelter, a quiet loan, no questions asked. He had shaved in the bathroom of a community center. He had his tools in a bag that Eleanor's assistant had quietly arranged for him. The building was a large residential complex on the north side of the city. 16 floors, 212 units, a small army of contractors and part-time staff who looked at Daniel on his first day with various degrees of curiosity. He got to work. It came back to him quickly. The discipline, the routine, the particular satisfaction of fixing things that were broken. A leaking pipe, a faulty elevator panel, a balcony door that had been sticking since November. One by one, the small failures of the building were addressed, and the tenants began to notice. By the end of the first month, Petra called Eleanor. "The tenants are asking about the new maintenance guy," she said. 3 different people stopped me in the lobby to say they'd never had problems addressed this quickly." Eleanor said nothing, but Petra heard something in the silence that she recognized as satisfaction. Daniel lived in the small unit on the ground floor. It was modest, 1 bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen barely large enough for 1 person. The first night he slept there, he sat on the edge of the bed for a long time before lying down. He thought of Marie. He thought of the person he had been before the grief swallowed him. He thought of the wet sidewalk outside the Harrington Grand and the moment he had looked at the purse and made a choice. He thought, "This is not the life I had, but maybe it can be a life I build." Over the following months, something unexpected happened. Daniel began talking to the homeless men and women he occasionally saw near the building. The ones who slept in the small park across the street. The ones who lined up at the shelter 2 blocks away on Thursday evenings. He knew their world. He knew its rhythms and its language. And he had something he hadn't had when he was in it. Standing. He started asking around. Called in small favors. Talked to building managers he'd met through work. And slowly, informally, imperfectly, he began connecting people to jobs. A man named Victor, who had spent 4 years on the streets, started as a janitor at a parking garage. He stayed. He was promoted. He moved into a room at a boarding house. A woman named Clara, who had aged out of the shelter system, got a job at a laundry service. She told Daniel it was the first time in 2 years she had gone to bed knowing what tomorrow looked like. When Eleanor found out, she did not express surprise. She called Daniel into her office, a rare invitation, and sat across from him the way she had in the meeting room of the Harrington Grand. Still, direct, without sentiment. "You're running an informal employment program out of my property," she said. Daniel didn't look away. "Yes. How many people?" 11 placed so far. 3 more in the pipeline. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then, "You should formalize it. Register it properly. Give it a name." Daniel looked at her. "I don't have. I'll handle the administrative setup," she said. "You handle the people." And that was how the Mercer Bridge program was born. It was not a large organization, not at first. It didn't have a glossy website or a board of celebrity donors. It was a practical, unglamorous thing. A network of employers who agreed to give people a chance. A team of volunteers who helped with resumes and interview preparation, and Daniel at the center of it, doing what he had always done. Showing up, paying attention, and treating people like they were worth something. Because he never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. There's a kind of story that gets told a lot in this world. The story of the clever person who found a loophole, or the ruthless person who outmaneuvered everyone, or the lucky person who was simply in the right place. This is not that kind of story. This is the story of a man who had lost everything and chose, in one cold and wet and unremarkable moment, to do the right thing anyway. Not because someone was watching, not because he expected a reward, but because some people carry their character like a bone in their body. It doesn't disappear when everything else does. And it is the story of a woman who had built walls so high she had almost forgotten what she was protecting herself from, and who was reminded by a stranger with worn shoes and nothing to gain that trust is not a weakness, that honesty is not naive, that the instinct to see people clearly and give them a real chance is one of the most powerful things a person can do. Sometimes the smallest acts of honesty create the biggest miracles, not because the universe rewards goodness automatically, but because one honest act opens a door. And behind that door, if you're brave enough to walk through it, is a version of your life you didn't know was still possible. What would you have done if you had found that purse? Would you have walked away? Would you have kept the money? Or would you have stood in the rain on a cold city sidewalk and made the quiet, difficult choice to return something that wasn't yours?
As the sun
Take a
sets
moment
on the
to
old
think
ways,
about that.
we
And when you
rise
have your
to
answer,
meet the future.
leave in the comments.
This
We want to hear from
is
you.
the final closing.